meeting is being recorded.
There you go. We're live.
Ooh.
Where's Dan, Sylvia?
Dan is committed to this month of teaching a Sunday school class for the chapel church, is where he has attended for the last 40 or 50 years. Down the road, no, up the road a couple miles till it burned down, and now they're meeting in a community center in Green Mountain. But he was on schedule and thought we could go from here to there, which we can, but he's got a lot to do to get set up and ready, because the people who teach Sunday school are supposed to bring the snacks and the flowers, and I guess you do one thing, you do it all on those Sundays. So it's a small group nowadays. I think when I first started getting acquainted with them, there were 40 or 50 people, and now there are maybe 20, 25. But trying to rebuild has been a very big dilemma for them, or considering rebuilding. So I don't think they're going to do that.
Dave Mills, are you getting any of the rain that they're forecasting down that way?
It came through night before last and yesterday, and departed yesterday afternoon around 4:30 or 5. And now it's headed out to north of Bermuda. But this morning the sun is shining. So we had about 5 inches here at the house.
My goodness.
It's a lot.
Goodness.
Well, once.
It settled the dust for sure.
It was getting dry.
Chantel, how's the weather in Quebec?
Sorry.
How's the weather there?
It's still snowy.
Burr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
You keep it.
Keep it there.
There's a few of us here at the meeting house today, and we're surrounded by 4-H exhibits too. Decatur Township Fair is coming up.
Oh.
This next week, I can make an announcement if you'd like.
Go ahead, make an announcement.
Okay. And I've got my Lions Club shirt on. The fair opens on this Wednesday, the 8th, and runs Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, located at the high school grounds at Decatur Central. And there's a lot of 4-H projects. Stan Bailey is involved with some of those in the livestock tent. And we have another leader who does, I guess we kind of call them indoor projects, although they're not, but things like beekeeping and different kinds of electronic projects. Anyway, there's a carnival that goes with it. There's a food tent where you can eat and enjoy, and there's entertainment every evening. So this week from 6 to 10 every evening.
Okay. Well, Lynn, do you have a prelude for us today?
I've asked Glenn to play Jesus Calls Us or the Tumult.
Are there joys or concerns to share this morning?
Well, today is Lynn's birthday, and also our oldest grandson Dylan is 24 today. Logan was 23 on the 3rd.
And unfortunately, I am not 24.
So how old are you, Lynn?
I'm 70 today. So that's my concern for today. I have actually 3 joys. Steve is out helping to plant beans today. They should finish up today. He's been in the field this will be the 4th day in a row. So he's doing what he loves to do, and I'm really pleased that he's able to do that. My brother came through his open heart surgery very well this week. They put a sleeve around his aortic aneurysm and replaced one of his heart valves. And I've actually texted with him directly this morning rather than through other family members. So he was the first happy birthday text that I got today, which was a real joy to me. And the third one is that I helped one of my great nieces graduate from high school yesterday. Her graduation party was up in Thorntown. Got to see lots of family and friends, and that was fun too.
Well, you really get around for an old lady.
I know.
Well, I have a concern. If you could keep my friend Troy in your prayers. We're going back to the hospital for tests, and he's on morphine, and that seems to help, but we don't even know what's wrong yet.
Getting ready for the fair on the Saturday before the fair starts. It's always a challenge. The last 40 years, some days we have a few people, and most of us are over 60 years old, and still hauling pipe gates around and bolting things together. But the last 2 years, it's been a real blessing. Football team shows up, 15 to 20 guys about the size of me or bigger, and sure takes a lot of the heat off of getting that thing put together. And then next Sunday they'll show up at one and put it all back in the semi and send it back.
Well, let's hold these joys and concerns in our hearts, lift them to God as we center into silence. Sylvia is our worship leader this morning, and so she will lead us henceforth.
We who consider ourselves now in the senior category have worked a long time at coming up with the answers we think we need for a good and productive life. So now our minds are made up, our convictions are settled, and we can float on a moving stream without fear of being blown away, right? I remember Beulah Mills Thornburg, who I thought was old at the time, but she was probably 70, say something like this. She said, "I have worked my whole life forming my values and learning lessons about how to live. And now that I have the answers, nobody wants to hear them." I also remember Brent Bill saying, as he was thinking about retiring, that he was trying to back out of some leadership opportunities by not attending some discussions or planning sessions because it was time for the younger friends to take the lead. But in that case, the response of the younger friends was that they needed him to be there to share his wisdom and experience. I think it was great for them to ask him to remain with them for some guidance and maybe even wisdom. But truthfully, as I gain experience and perspective, as I have arrived long ago at the senior status, I think I find myself with fewer answers than I used to have. Some concerns I used to have are now tossed aside as not worth worrying about anymore. Situations seem way more complicated than I earlier understood, and the behaviors and convictions of some people, lots of people nowadays, seem to be way more irrational than I could ever even imagine. And so I find myself asking more questions about what to believe. And sometimes I feel like my footing is less sure than I expected it to be at this stage of my life. Maybe I need to be asking more questions. So, to question or not to question, that is the question, at least for today's food for thought. Charles Ringman, I've mentioned him several times in this little devotional booklet that we have enjoyed, called Dare to Journey with Henry Nouwen, in his reflection number 146, encourages us to keep searching for truth no matter how old we are. He writes, receiving mere information does little to further a person's quest for knowledge, and the process of learning things without having a real interest in them or failing to see the relevance of what we are learning does little to make those things we have learned a real part of our lives. Nouwen believes that one of the problems of education remains that solutions are offered without the existence of a question to start with. We know people who do that, don't we? Who offer ways to solve our problems when we didn't even ask them for their help. Rima goes on to say, much religious education suffers from the same problem. Doctrines are taught, but they are not the response to issues people are struggling with. Worse than that, in many religious establishments, asking questions is not even encouraged. People are given what the religious leaders think it's important for them to hear. Therefore, much religious teaching is wide of the mark. Perhaps you too have faced religious teaching that makes no sense to you or is irrelevant to your soul's condition. Maybe you have listened to what I call religious rhetoric with repeated vocabulary that is never understood or explained. Maybe we have found ourselves thinking that if we just use the right words, such as Jesus is my Savior, or because of Jesus' death on the cross, my sins have been forgiven, that we will then be right with God. But even at my age, I still have difficulty understanding how people can say those words over and over, but not modify their behaviors accordingly. And if we do talk with people who say those words and even ask what they mean to them, what if we don't resonate with their responses? Who else do we ask? And do we feel that we are in a safe place on our journey to be asking those questions at all? Well, I first turned to the concordance of my study Bible to see where I could find guidance about questions of faith. You know, the word question isn't even in the concordance. Of course, there are several references to other words such as trust and doubt and truth, which I'll come back for another message sometime. So today, I consulted the expert called Google as I prepared for this message. I entered this question: what does the Bible say about asking questions? And lo and behold, up popped a website called .questions.org. I was amused that it was promoted by the statement, 693,082 questions answered so far on the topics of God, Jesus, the Bible, and theology. Well, that was Thursday morning, but by last evening, 800 more questions had been answered. Michael Howdman founded .questions.org in 2005, and he still serves as its CEO. I don't know this person. His staff is volunteer. During my visit to the website, it quickly offered the 20 questions most often asked and answered, so I decided to see what was number 1. You'll love this. The question most often asked was, what does the Bible say about women pastors? Just in case you're curious about the answer, it is more extensive than this, and some of it makes sense, but this was included as Paul's letter to Timothy states, a woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She must be silent. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became the sinner. But women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with propriety. Here we are. In fact, Dan just commented the other day that he wondered what evangelical Christians would believe today if the writings of some other biblical author were chosen instead of Paul's. How would our belief system look without Paul? And I was glad when I read that Quakers record gifts of ministry without granting pastors authority over anyone, especially because of the order in which they show up on this earth. Anyway, the GotQuestions.org website may contain material that might interest you or help us all to understand how some fellow Christians think about this and other such questions. Also in the top 10 questions were, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? What does the Bible say about tattoos? Can a Christian lose salvation? Are some of the top questions asked. Well, here's a question that is asked on the website, and I thought I'd give you this response to see what you think. Is it wrong to question God? And the answer is, it is not whether we should question God, but in what manner and for what reason we question him. To question God is not in itself wrong. The prophet Habakkuk had questions for God concerning the time and agency of the Lord's plan. Habakkuk, rather than being rebuked for his questions, is patiently answered, and the prophet ends up his book with a song of praise to the Lord. Many questions are put to God in Psalms. These are cries of the persecuted who are desperate for God's intervention and salvation. Although God does not always answer our questions in the way we want, we conclude from these passages that a sincere question from an earnest heart is welcomed by God. Insincere questions or questions from a hypocritical heart are a different matter. Quote, this is from Hebrews, and without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. After King Saul had disobeyed God, his questions went unanswered. It is entirely different to wonder why God allowed a certain event than it is to directly question God's goodness. Having doubts is different from questioning God's sovereignty and attacking his character. In short, an honest question is not a sin, but a bitter, untrusting, or rebellious heart is. God is not intimidated by questions. God invites us to enjoy close fellowship with him. And when we question God, it should be from a humble spirit and an open mind. We can question God, but we should not expect an answer unless we are genuinely interested in his answer. God knows our hearts and knows whether we are genuinely seeking him to enlighten us. Our heart attitude is what determines whether it is right or wrong to question God. For myself, I believe who God is and what God thinks and does is much greater than our comprehension. Paul's letter to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 13 gives me the affirmation that I don't have all the answers now. It goes like this: where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, this is written by Paul, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7, says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks, the door will be opened. God doesn't promise a delivery time for his answer like J.C. Penney does when we place an order online, so we have to be patient. We also have to be aware that answers come in a variety of ways, and sometimes we have to be hit over the head to get our attention or experience deep pain. But I believe that God is glad for us to ask the questions. He wants us to keep seeking and knocking. Henry Nouwen says, those who think they have arrived have lost their way. I say, when we stop knocking at God's door to seek his wisdom and guidance, our life is at a standstill. And we need to find people with which to journey who care enough to listen and explore with us. I thank God that West Newton Friends have been good journey mates for me. May we also walk the journey with others to share what answers we might have, of course, only when we are asked for them. But keep asking questions.
Thank you, Sylvia. We'll now continue with our unprogrammed worship. Sorry, I forgot to unmute while Lynn played the closing hymn. Would you like to replay it so friends can hear it? Sure. And then we'll go on to unprogrammed worship for those who wish to stay for that or can.
Thank you, Sylvia.
number of things that Sylvia said resonated with me. But one reminded me of a conversation that Chip and I had the other day when he came for a visit. We were talking about foreign languages, and we both took Spanish, and neither of us can speak very much of it. And Chip was saying, yeah, they taught us how to conjugate verbs and all those sorts of things, but they never really taught us how to speak it, you know, how to be conversational in it. And I thought, yeah, that's a real shortcoming in some ways of how the educational system has approached foreign languages, teaching all this, you know, why don't they just teach us how to speak with each other and then move into the deeper things. And when somebody's talking about the theological language and the questions and the talk that we give, I thought, yeah, how much have we done over the years of teaching theological phrases and big concepts without talking about what they matter for life or how to live a life, which has become one of my concerns as I've aged, about how we've done youth groups and how we've done church camps, working at getting the words right instead of helping people learn how to live. For the living of these days is one of my favorite hymns. You know, grant us courage, grant us wisdom for the living of these days, which seems to me what faith is for me these days, the courage to live according to my understanding of the gospel, and to try and encourage others to live up to the light they've been given. I hope we can learn to do that faithfully. I think that would be a much more attractive and winsome invitation to faith and all the theological questions, even at questions.com. Well, if all hearts are clear, we'll close meeting for worship, and we will reconvene at 10:35 for Sunday school to talk about Rhoda for any of you who'd like to join. Not Rhoda from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, a different one. This one's in the Bible. So it's good to see you. Be with you. It's good to see you again, Jonathan.
You too.
Bye, Jonathan. Bye. Steve.
Bye.
Bye, Sue.
Hi, everyone.
How are your ribs?